everyone. Welcome back to the How to Podcast series. You know, the podcast where we get to talk about all things podcasting. And today we have someone in the space that I've been admiring. I've been listening to her podcast. Their book is on the way. It should be here tomorrow. I'm so excited. Sara is on the podcast, and I'm so happy to have her here. She does a lot of great things. We're going to be talking today. We're going to talk a little bit about storytelling and podcasting, which I think is something all of us need to do the best we possibly can. And Sara's going to help us with that with her new book as well, and how to launch a podcast the right way. There's many different opinions on launching a podcast. Sara's going to educate us and help us on the journey. So Sara, thank you for being on the How to Podcast series.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
It's excellent. When I met you the first time, Sara, I hear your voice in my head when I listen, but when I meet you in person virtually on camera, it's the smile. You're just like, I feel like I'm home. Is welcoming. I feel like, yes, this is a good place to be. So thank you for making time to do this.
Oh, thank you. You
see,
everyone makes me feel so welcome.
Right. It's so nice. Okay, so first of all, where are you in this big world of ours?
I am right outside of Austin, Texas.
Beautiful. The land of the big sky.
Yes, everything's bigger down here.
I'm in Niagara Falls. We're the land of the big hill with water.
Yes, I've heard of that.
Yeah, that's what we are.
And you're on the Canadian side or the American side?
Yes.
Canadian side.
Yeah,
okay. See, that's why you're so nice.
There
you're
you
Canadian.
go. Right. Well, we all have to take a test to make sure that we're all nice. So I passed, apparently. So that's good.
Or is it or else you get kicked out into New York or something?
I don't know what they do. I haven't found out yet.
I'm from New York. I'm allowed to say that.
Okay.
I'm from New York. I'm allowed to say that.
All right. All my New York listeners are like, hey. Yeah.
I'm from there too.
Okay, so we're good. We're going to talk about this on my other podcast, Living the Next Chapter, but you're an author. New book just came out recently. Can you tell us about your book?
Yes, absolutely. I am so excited about this. It's called Open This Book. It's the art of storytelling for aspiring thought leaders. And it is about a year in the making. It took forever to finally get it to be perfect, but I really wanted to put something together that helps people tell their own story. Because I am a huge proponent of storytelling, especially in podcasting and thought leadership. If you're speaking on a stage, wherever you're speaking, if you're not telling stories, you are not connecting. So I wrote my own stories as a way to teach you how to tell yours. There's writing exercises and journals and all this fun stuff to just help you figure out how to tell your story and how to tell it in a way that's going to have a lot of impact, especially on your professional life.
It's beautiful. We need more of this. We need more storytelling, and we need people that can help us to craft a good story. I love that. On top of that as well, podcasting. Tell us about your podcast journey a little bit.
Yeah, I've been in the podcast space for, I want to say 4 or 5 years now. It's been a while. I started on the production side when I was in-house as a marketing person, and I fell in love with podcast guesting. Not so much being a guest, because back then I hated it. I did not want to be the one on the mic. I wanted to be behind the scenes, but more of seeing how people did it and the good things that people did and the bad things and what made a good guest, what made a not so good guest. So I actually launched Favorite Daughter Media in 2022 to focus on teaching people how to be guests on podcasts. And that grew into now basically storytelling coaching, which is what I've really fallen in love with my book and everything, and just teaching people how to tell stories and then how to tell them in the context of podcasting. And in last year, I launched my podcast, Branded, which I co-host with Larry Roberts. And we have a company together called Branded that we launch podcasts for other people.
Beautiful. And do you have your own red hat like Larry does, or what?
I have 3 of them upstairs that I've stolen over the years, for sure.
Good. Larry's well known for his red hat, and you can catch him at any podcasting event or speaking event. There he is. There he goes. And the red hat's right there.
He is the red hat guy.
There you go.
But my whole brand is pink. He's Red Hat Media. I'm Favorite Daughter, and everything's pink. So he actually does have his same hat, but in pink, for when he goes to something to represent my brand or support my brand. He does have a pink hat.
Thank you, Larry. That's so nice. That's great. That's awesome. I love that.
Oh, it wasn't his choice.
No, it wasn't his choice? Oh, okay.
Nope, that was all me.
That was voluntold. You're going to do this, Larry.
Yes,
I love that.
Exactly.
I love that. That's good.
He sometimes forgets, quote unquote, to bring it.
Unquote. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Larry, we got you. We figured you out. I love
You
that.
see right through
I
you.
love it. You mentioned good guest, bad guest. Makes me wonder, from your background and your knowledge and expertise, can you give us an example of a good guest and maybe an example of a maybe not so good guest thing that is happening in podcasting?
Yeah, there's so many different ways to guest on podcast, and it really just comes down to being your authentic self, and that authenticity generally will make you a good guest, but there's some mistakes that I see people make, and one of them is not being open and not being authentic. We talk about telling stories, and that's really the most important piece of podcasting. So when people go on a podcast, especially I work in podcasting using it as a marketing tool and launching them as marketing tools. But there's a very specific art to doing that in a way that is still content first and creating quality content. But some people that look at it as a marketing tool, they'll go on a podcast and it just sounds like an infomercial.
Yeah,
They're not telling stories, they're not giving value, they're not giving experiences. And that's just an ad. We don't want that.
right.
So leaving that aside and not focusing on having this be, let's talk about what I do for a living and how you can pay me to do it. But what have I learned in my career? What have I learned that I can teach you? And if you really lean into that and not lean into, I'm the only one who can know this information or else you won't pay me for it,
Right.
that's going to make you a better guest.
Yeah, I like that. When I do pre-interviews with my guests ahead of time, one thing I say to them is, I don't want to offend you, but the most important person in this podcast is not you or me. It's the listener, right? And if it wasn't for them, this is just a conversation between two people, which is fine. I love meeting you, but at the end of the day, we're here for the listener. So everything we do together is framed around them. It's not framed around you and selling your business, your product, your service, your book, your song, whatever. Those are all important things. But at the end of the day, I want you to connect with the listener and have them here in the room with us and have you talk to them as if they're sitting right beside you. Then have them up in the stands far, far away, nameless, faceless, just one person in the crowd, and we don't even acknowledge their presence. I like to bring them into the conversation as much as possible in my podcast.
Absolutely. And I love how you said like your book. And I feel weird that I'm now on the other side of this because I've heard people say like, oh, podcasters love authors. And I'm sitting there like, no, we don't. No, we don't. And that's because one of the things that I see authors do very often is almost like answer questions like a politician
Right.
because they don't want to give away what's in the book. And that is a horrible thing to do on a podcast. You're not giving any value. You're treating it as an ad, but there's no content there. It's when you answer every question is, oh, well, you'll have to read my book to find
Yeah.
out. Oh, that's in my book. Like, I can't tell you that. It's in the book. And podcasts are generally about half an hour.
Yeah.
Even my book's not even that long. There's no way I could give you all the content in my book in 30 minutes.
Right.
There is far more in there. So even if I spend 30 minutes telling you content exactly from the book, there's still going to be more value in the book later. So it's not taking away that value. It's proving that there's value there. And that is a mistake people make all the time.
Okay. All right. Well, I like that. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. So the book is available everywhere, obviously, through your website, and all that information is right. We can include that in the show notes, but
Absolutely. Openthisbook.com.
openthisbook.com. There you go. It's so easy. I can tell that you've planned this out. I love that.
I am the URL queen. Every page on my website has its own URL.
How many domains do you have at any given time?
Oh God,
Do you even know?
dozens.
Okay.
Dozens. I just bought another one today. I bought one 2 days ago. Anytime I come up with an idea of a service, I come up with like a new audience I want to target, anything I do, I go and buy a URL for it
Smart.
every single time.
Smart. That is a great idea. I think for authors, when you have a book, if you can get the title of your book as a website domain, that's a great idea, right? You want to own that real estate on the internet. Is really what it is.
Yeah. And if you can tie the URL to your services and to the industry, it also just adds credibility.
Right.
If I'm talking to someone in real estate about podcasting, I own podcastsforrealestate.com.
Nice. Good website.
If I'm talking to people in education, I own podcastforeducation.com, podcastfornonprofits.com, or nonprofit podcasting. I don't know, one
Yeah.
of the two.
Yeah.
But
See.
I own all of these URLs that speak exactly to what I do and who I do it for.
Wow.
And if I say to someone in that industry, if you're in real estate and you hear I own podcastforrealestate.com, I automatically sound credible.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a great way to introduce yourself and have people remember you as well. Right. That's really
Yeah.
important.
And especially with lead magnets, if you have a lead magnet and you don't have a custom URL for it,
Yeah.
you're losing opportunities.
Yeah.
Especially with podcasts, because I'm telling you a URL, I'm not giving you an opportunity to just click it. So it has to be short, sweet, easy to remember, not favoritedaughtermedia.com/lead magnet /this1/2.
Yeah.
It has to just be as concise as possible.
Smart. See, everyone's learning so much already. This is great. I love having you on, Sarah. This is awesome. So you get into telling how to tell good stories and the storytelling method, and you've really raised that as an important thing in podcasting. Can you kind of give us some examples of storytelling that you've done? I've done some stuff in my podcast that when I look back at it, I'm like, that was a good story. Like, I'm proud that I put it out there. I'd like to hear some of your ideas of what you have considered or heard, maybe in the space, that were like good stories that really brought you in as a listener.
No, you'll have to read the book.
And there it is, everyone.
I always have to say it. I always have to say it at least once. So it's actually the way that I kind of tumbled into this whole space of storytelling was by telling a story.
Okay.
And what's like the PG rating of the show?
Oh, we're good. Go for it.
Okay. So when I was at my first ever podcast movement, and I was the executive producer of a podcast that was in the finance space. And I really wanted to get the host on Stacking Benjamins, which is a huge finance show, amazing show. And I was stalking the host for 3 days, like actually holding up a book at a cocktail table, might as well have been eyes cut out of a newspaper, that level of stalking. He'll never let me live it down. But after 3 days, I finally, I want to say like corner him, get him like it. That sounds so much worse, but we're in a hallway and I see him and I basically just yell his name. And the first thing I say to him is, I've been casually stalking you for 3 days. If I don't get my host on your show, I will be fired. And he just looks at me like, well, we can't let that happen. Here's my number. Let's meet tomorrow and I'll tell you how to get on the show. So he won't let the stalking thing go. I'll never let him forget that I told him I stalked him for 3 days and he gave me his number instead of like calling security. But I digress. So I meet him the next day and I'm pitching the host of the show. And I had never pitched before. I had no idea what I was doing. Now I have a business doing it. So kind of comes full circle. But I had no idea what I was doing. And I just started saying, well, he's an expert in this and this. And he has these designations. And he's done this for 20 years. And Joe, the host, he just looks at me and says, I don't need an expert. I want someone with a cool story. And I don't know what shut off in my brain at that moment, but what came out of my mouth was, do you want to hear about the time I got a tattoo of a penis while I was in Ireland? And yes, he did. So that is how I accidentally got myself booked on Stacking Benjamins. To tell an embarrassing story about a bad tattoo. But when he wanted me on the show, just because I hit him with right up front, hit him with the punchline, and he had to hear the rest of it. We sat down, I told him the whole story, and his show is entertainment first, even though it has like a money theme, and this is a great story. I need to have this story. So it was then his job to kind of find the money bylines and find the value in all of this that makes it more worth bringing on the show than just, I got the girl with the penis tattoo. So he actually, in real time, in the recording, guided me through the way I told that story. And he showed me the value in it. And he reframed it in my own head that oh, this isn't just some silly story I tell while I'm bartending
Hmm.
for laughs. This is actually this journey of self-discovery that I went on, and I learned all these lessons, and I faced these fears, and I changed my life when I got back and stopped going the safe route and moved across the country, doubled my salary, did all of these things because I went on this one trip that showed me that I could do things that scared me.
Wow.
And I tied that all back to this tattoo because I got the tattoo to commemorate that experience. So I'm on this podcast learning how to tell my own story.
Interesting.
And I've taken that experience and just kind of went headfirst into it. And now I've gotten so obsessed with helping other people find their own value
Hmm.
in their stories. Because so many people, I tell them, like, oh, I'll help you tell your story. And they're like, well, I don't have one. Of course you have
Yeah.
one. You just haven't found the value in it yet.
Yeah. Or the connection, right?
Yeah.
Right.
People think that to tell a story, it has to be like headline worthy. It has to be a story that is traumatic, dramatic, or sensational. And it's really like the everyday, like small stories that have the most connection because they're the most common. And connections come from shared experiences. So working with people to figure out what those important moments are that they didn't originally see as important is so much fun.
Nice. Great. I love how you tied that all together as a good storyteller would. Well done. See?
Life imitates art.
There you go. I did an episode recently where I talked about, would you do something new and scary if somebody believed in you? And would you write the book? Would you do the podcast? Would you do the thing? If somebody came up beside you and went, I see greatness in you. I think you should do this. And I could have left it at that and like, good episode, Dave, let's move forward. But I'm like, here's a story. And I would take my kids and my wife, the 5 of us, we would go and do like a dirt bike day where we would get training in the morning on all these different bikes and we would go riding in the afternoon. And it was great. So much fun. All my kids at different age levels and skill sets. But we had like a leader in front of us, a leader behind us, and then the 5 of us. So 7 of us doing trails together. Awesome. Great adventure, right? And I was out with my family. We got to this little park area, this little track area. And you could do like little roundabouts. And my kids are small. They're not really big. And my wife is with them and she's riding with them. They're having a great time. The main instructor comes up to beside me and says, you look bored. And I'm like, excuse me? Like I've been riding for like a day. Okay. Like I'm not a pro at all. And he's like, come on with me. We're going to go do the good trails. I'm like, no. He's like, I've watched you. You're good. You'll be fine. Come on, let's go. Just you and me. And he takes off. He goes into the forest, and now I'm sitting here on a bike, idling away, going, I guess I better go. Like I guess I have zero confidence in myself, Sarah, zero. But he saw something in me that said, you could do this. So with all of the fear and all of the doubt, and I can't do this, I'm going to kill myself. This is going to be a horrible experience. I clicked the bike in gear and I followed him. He took me on the most treacherous trails, straight down hills, straight up hills, off curbs and cliff sides. And it was the most fun and fearful thing I've ever done in my life. And after about 45 minutes with him, he brought me back to my family. And he's like, Dave did a great job. And I'm like shaking because I just did something I thought I could never do. But somebody saw something in me that said, you can do this. So come with me. Let's go. I see greatness in you. So in a podcast setting or writing your book, I'm looking at the listener going, what if somebody believed in you? You don't believe in yourself, but what if somebody believed in you? Would you do the thing? And I'm like, that's the power of a story, because now you're there with me in the forest and seeing these bikes zooming around, and you're like, what would I do in that situation? It's because you can put yourself into the story when the story is told. So that's why I love the idea of your book. Is I think we need, as podcasters, not just to rattle off 5 points or 5 stats or 5 facts, but where's the story? Like, where do I fit into the story, and how can I apply that to my life? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it makes so much sense. And when you say like put yourself into it and you feel like you're there and you can how you would react, our brains actually do that. And on a neurochemical level, when you're hearing a story, your brain is firing neurons in the same way that the person whose brain is telling it. It's like a mirror neural reaction.
Yeah.
It's called neural coupling.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so your brain is actually acting it out for you. So you're tricking your brain into thinking you were there. And that I think is something so powerful in storytelling because, like I said before, stories come from shared experiences. If you can tell a story well enough, you can trick your audience into thinking they had a shared experience because their brain just went on that whole ride with you.
Yeah. Right.
And that is like brain ninja stuff that I am all for.
Yes. I love that. What about, okay, so sometimes I hear podcasters, maybe newer in podcasting or authors, who seem to give away the story at the beginning. Like when they're introducing the story, like they give you the whole thing and they kind of summarize it and they haven't even told the story yet, but we already know the ending. And I'm like, wait a minute. I think you're supposed to do that a little different. Like you're supposed to actually make me want to stay for the remainder of the story, not give me the whole story in 10 seconds. I want to hear the entire thing, so let me tell you the story about the time I made $100 because I found it on the ground. Okay, well, you just told me the whole story and you're just introducing the story. So maybe there's a different way of doing that. Is there a good way to set up a story for our listeners or our readers?
It's funny you say that because it's not exactly the way that I do it, but that's similar to my favorite way of setting up a story. And I have kind of two ways of setting up a story. One is just the lead in, and it's the traditional. You start from the beginning, you go chronologically to the end.
Yeah.
And my brain doesn't work that way. I have such bad ADHD that I am not following a plot line. I am chasing it down, trying to beat it to the finish line. I'm not following you as you explain the events in the story. I'm guessing what comes next.
Okay. Yeah.
So I can't, it's hard for me to actually follow the story. I call it the upfront method. And it is just telling the ending. You don't tell the whole story, you just tell the ending. And that gets people hooked and they want to hear like how it happened. It's the tattoo method. I told him up front,
right.
I got a tattoo of a penis while I was in Ireland. And he's like, I need to know how that happened. It's the I bet you're wondering how we got here kind of story that you see in the movies. And you just come out with the punchline. You come out with the hook.
Nice.
And if you do that and the hook is hooky enough, I don't think that's a word, but we're going to go with it.
Let's go for that. Yeah.
You can actually get people to want to follow the rest of the story. And then for the people with my kind of brain, I don't have to be jumping ahead because I know what's going to happen. I want to know what led you there. So you actually are paying attention to those details.
Interesting.
So I think the way you're explaining it, they tell you up front what happened and how almost.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that, yeah.
I want you to say what happened, but then the story is the how.
Nice. I like how you worded that. Exactly. Yeah. Don't give away the whole thing and then try to tell the story, but make your people sit around and wonder, like, well, how did that even get there? How did that happen? And then they start thinking of their own way to happen, and then you can tell your story. I like that.
Yeah, it's like James Bond movies. You don't start when he's waking up in the morning. You start in the middle of the action.
Right.
And then people are, okay, well, how did he get into this fight?
Yeah.
Like, what is happening? I need to know the context.
Yeah.
So give them the fight scene and then share the context.
2 seconds in, you're already in the car speeding down a highway at the cliffs with the ocean beside you and somebody's shooting at you. You have no idea what's going on, but I'm already in the action. Good.
Yeah.
Nice.
You already know I got a bad tattoo and now you want to know how much you should judge me.
So we're going to have to put a link to that episode with Joe and Stacking Benjamin just so we can all go hear the story because that'll be great.
And then years later, I actually had him on my podcast to tell his side of that story too. And that was a lot of fun. And he also wrote the foreword for my book.
Well, there you go. So that's even better.
Full circle.
See? That's amazing.
He's one of my favorite people.
I love it. I love it. That's great. Okay, so any other things, like what about maybe overtelling a story? Like where we get really detailed, like almost to the point where we're boring our audience. Can we go too far with our story?
Absolutely. I have 4 components of a compelling story that I outline. And one of those components is having the right amount of detail. And the only way I can ever think to explain this is think about every conversation you have with your mother, because my mother is the queen of over detailing.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime I need to hear anything about something that happened that day, I need to know what she had for lunch and who she was with and how she met that person and what their uncle does for a living. Like everything. And I'm like, Mom, is this even relevant? She's like, no, I'm getting to it. It's going to be relevant. And then we get to the end. I'm like, Mom, that wasn't relevant. If it doesn't add to the story,
Yeah.
you don't need it.
Yeah.
You want to give details. You want it to be detailed to the point that they can visualize it and they can put themselves there and feel like they're a part of it.
Yeah.
But don't give the ones that aren't necessary. And this can be a learning experience. This can be something that you kind of have to play with. So if you're telling a story and you start to see your audience kind of losing interest, like, okay, like wrap this up, those are not the details you need. Pay attention to when your audience is actually really wrapped and following along, and then you'll know that you have the right details.
I love that. Great. That's good. Because the one thing I notice is when I'm listening to a great storyteller, I'm taking their story and putting it into my world in some cases. So, for example, somebody might say, I walked into my grandmother's kitchen and she was baking. And that's all they say. In my mind, I'm in my grandmother's kitchen. I'm not in your grandmother's kitchen, I'm in mine. So without giving me all the details about her kitchen, the colors and all that stuff, I'm in my grandmother's kitchen. She's got white cupboards. There's like a steam on the windows because the pies are being made right now. There's that smell of fresh cut fruit and pies being created. I'm in my kitchen. I'm enjoying your story, but I'm placing myself in my context. So that's what I really love about a good story is you're not forcing me into your kitchen. You're letting me go to my kitchen and hear your story.
Because that story is bringing up that shared experience.
That connection,
And
right?
that's creating that connection. No, I love that. And I also think a good storyteller can almost do the same thing in reverse. So if you're speaking almost as a like facilitator or educating at a conference for an industry that you're not a part of or something, one thing that people have gotten a little confused when I say storytelling is they don't all have to be these like personal stories. They don't have to be your childhood stories. Case studies are stories, and examples of things you've done with clients are stories. Like you can go purely professional stories. But if you're able to take your experience and craft a story that relates it to their world instead of pulling them into yours, that's how you're going to reach other audiences. So it's not just, I am an expert in this type of marketing. It's, I love this type of marketing and here's how it applies in your industry. So having it really transfer into their life through a story, it doesn't have to be a story that's happened. You can write the story. Okay. Stories can be written. Yeah. So creating a story that will show them like applicable ways to use the information you're giving them, it's going to help them remember the information, and it's going to help it make sense and help them connect.
Perfect. And we're going to do more about your book on my other podcast and get into even more detail on that, which I'm excited. I keep checking the mailbox every day. I'm waiting for this thing to show up, Sarah. I need this book. So I will be checking later today. Maybe it arrives today. I don't know. It could be here now. But I'm looking forward to having my own copy.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm really excited about your book, and congratulations on writing that. The one thing I want to talk about, too, though, is I have a lot of people reaching out to me asking questions around launching their podcast. And we talked about this before we hit record, that's something you help people do, and you do it very well. So for new podcasters, they have a dream to do this whole thing that we're doing right now, but they feel intimidated, overwhelmed, a little nervous, right? I want you to ride up beside them on that dirt bike and go, I see greatness in you. You can do this. Let's go. So we're going to go on a ride with you. You're leading. We're following. Sarah, give us some kind of overarching things that we can think about when we launch our podcast. You're in charge now. You're the lead rider. We're riding behind you. Let's go. Where are we going with this?
The first stop is understanding the term ULP, and that is unique listening proposition.
I like that.
So we know about the UVPs in sales, unique value proposition. With a podcast, we call it unique listening proposition. And there are so many podcasts in the world,
Yes.
and you want to have one. What makes yours different? That's kind of the first step. You have to be able to answer that question. And when you're able to answer that, it's going to help guide everything else in the launch process because it's going to help you name it. It's going to help you target your audience. It's going to help you frame the conversations because every episode of your podcast should come back to that unique listening proposition. It's kind of like the promise that you're putting out there. Like, if you listen to my podcast, this is what you're going to get. And you won't get this anywhere else.
Good.
So with I'll ask you, your podcast, what is your unique listener proposition? I am putting you right on the spot.
Oh, I love this. Now you're making me nervous. I love this because I was just going to ask you to do the same thing. Give us an example. So I'll give mine, and then I'd love to hear an example from what you've done with others as well. So
Sure.
For the How to Podcast series, I think my uniqueness for the show is that it's all community based in that we are focused on building up the community. And I love a quote that says, "There's wisdom in the counsel of many." So I love the idea that there's many voices on the show, not just a single solitary voice, because I only know what I know. So by bringing people like you on, that's an expert in your space, I get to learn. My audience gets to learn. So it's community-based podcasting support without judgment. We're here to help everybody share your voice.
I love it. And that is a message that you weave in to every conversation, every guest that you have, every co-host that you have, all of these episodes, they all weave together to present that message.
Beautiful.
But you have to establish that at the beginning to guide the rest of your decision.
So is that your why, or is that in addition to your why?
That's a good question. I think they can tie together very well.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily have to be the why, but it's going to support it.
Okay. That makes sense.
So if your why is you want to spread this community, then you're doing it for this reason. And then your ULP is kind of how you do it.
Okay. That makes sense.
Kind of like brand values and then the guiding principles. So your brand values is what you promise. Your guiding principles is what you will do to uphold those values.
Okay. So
now I'm going too deep into personal branding.
I like it. So give us an example from people maybe you've worked with, a show you've worked on, or your own show, the ULP that you would say for one of these as an example.
Yeah. So I'll use my own show. It's called Branded. It's the Comprehensive Guide to Creative Branding. And our show, there's a lot of shows about marketing and branding, and they all come from people that specifically do marketing or branding. And you're getting that one perspective. So I am 28. I spent years in advertising. I spent time in finance. I spent time in marketing. I spent time in all these different areas. My co-host is 51, and he didn't go to college. He worked in business analytics, IT for 20 years, and then fell into podcasting and has built his own personal brand really well. So you have these very unique experiences coming together, and you're getting perspectives not from just one person, but we're so different. We are polar opposites. I wanted all of the degrees. I got multiple bachelor's degrees, certifications. I've got letters after my name, all of this stuff. I wanted to be overeducated. He went to the school of life, and he's been through it, and he's done all the things. So we have different levels of education, different backgrounds, different everything, definitely different opinions. So our unique proposition is that you're getting very, very different views from the same people every week.
I like that. When I listen to podcasts and everybody agrees on everything, it's like, why do we have multiple voices? Everybody's like, yeah, Sarah, sounds good. Yeah, me too. That's how I do it.
You don't need someone to tell you what you're already thinking.
Right. I love that you have some back and forth with your show as well. That's really intriguing for me, because then we get to kind of watch, when you go watch sports, there's two different teams and they're both doing the same thing, but they do it differently. And you get to
Yeah.
pick which one is your favorite team right in that moment. So I'm like leaning a little bit. Okay, Sarah's got me. Oh, Larry said that. Now I'm kind of leaning to Larry. Oh, here comes Sarah again. And now I'm kind of back and forth as a listener going, this is really fun because now I'm thinking
Mhm.
about two different things than just one perspective.
Yeah. And it's kind of like the textbook perspective because I did learn this stuff. I learned through doing, but I also went to school for it and everything. And then there's the experience side, and that is so valuable. And I'm not, I love having my education and I love education in general, but I do not think that education and intelligence are the same thing. Some of the smartest people I've ever met did not go to college. And my co-host is one of them. He is so, so smart. So I'm able to see all of this experience in building his own brand and working in these different industries that I just haven't had the time.
Yeah.
I'm only 28.
Yeah.
He's been working for as long as I've been alive.
Right.
So it's so amazing to me to see how these concepts that I've learned in school and put into practice, he just learned just by doing.
Yeah.
And it's a different way to go about things. And we're able to like learn from each other in the episodes, which is my favorite part. Is there's almost every episode one of us says something that the other one has either never thought of or never knew. And it's so fun.
That's good. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we kind of close up here in a few minutes, because I know you have a lot to do, and I really appreciate you doing this, I'd like you to talk more about your podcast with Larry as well. I want everyone to go listen and subscribe. I love listening to that podcast. It's awesome. And again, it's kind of weird to see you on my camera, on my screen when I hear you on my ears, but it's a cool moment to have time with a podcaster that you really enjoy listening to. So thank you for all that you do. And for Larry, he's coming on later, which I'm excited to have the two of you have time for me as a listener. It's just a joy for me. So thank you.
Thank you.
But talk more before we head out. Again, I want you to talk about the podcast, but I would like for you to help us clarify what a brand is and what a brand is not. Because I hear a lot of confusing comments and directions and well-meaning people in the space who are maybe not giving a good picture, like a really accurate picture of what a brand really is. I'd love to hear that and then kind of take us through to the podcast, and then we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes.
Yeah. A brand is not a logo.
Thank you.
That in the most simple of possible terms, a brand is not a logo. It's not a color palette. It's not a tagline. And especially I focus in mostly personal branding. So my brand is me. And I am not a logo. I am my business name because it's Favorite Daughter Media and I am the favorite daughter. So I got that part right. But you have to go far past just those visuals. And when people are establishing a brand, like that's the first place they go. They always are like, well, I have a great idea for my logo and I have to have these colors. It's like, okay, but what are you? Who are you?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? Who do you do it for? So go like actually taking the step back and figuring out not only what you do, but who you are, why you do it, who you do it for, and figuring out your personal mission, your values, your vision. All of these things that if you look at a big corporation, they're going to have a page on their website with our mission and vision, our values, the pillars of our company. You need that too.
Mm-hmm.
You need a mission statement. And that's going to become basically your unique selling point, going back to that unique selling proposition. What is it that makes you different? And you need to get that clarity. I think people lack the clarity a lot, especially if they're new and they're just getting into whatever business that they're doing. They want to be everything for everybody because they'll work with anyone who will give them money. And I fell into that as well. When I first started, I wanted to focus in the podcast space, but I had experience in every aspect of marketing.
Yeah.
So my first couple clients, I was redoing their websites. I'm actually currently redoing 3 websites, but that's not the point. But I was taking on these projects that, is this what I love doing? No, but hey, they offered me money. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I really had a strong brand at the time because I couldn't say, this is what I do and this is who I do it for. It was, I'll do whatever you want me to because I need to pay my mortgage.
Yeah.
So getting that clarity is going to be really, really important.
Okay. I love that. That's a great, again, the whole thing. I hear that often. A brand is a logo. And I'm like, I don't know. It's maybe an element of it or supporting part of your brand, but it's not everything.
I spent so much time developing my brand. I'm still constantly developing it. Brands are not concrete. They are ever evolving, just like us, especially with personal brands. I got my logo for like $12.99 on Etsy. Just randomly, oh, I like her style. Cool, make me a logo.
Yeah.
Done. In my eyes, it was the least important part.
Yeah.
I wanted to really know what I was doing and why I was doing it, and what was if I wanted to be a full service marketing person, I wouldn't have left my job because I was a one-man director of marketing, basically the entire department for a financial advising firm. Mm-hmm. If I wanted to be that, I would have stayed.
Yeah.
So I had to really take the time to figure out what are the things that, like the projects and the concepts that get me excited. And that is how I established my brand. I love the podcast launch process. I love the podcast guesting piece. I love helping people tell their stories and hearing people tell their stories. So just focusing on why I'm doing this, because it's just, I want to do the things that I love. I don't want to do all of the little things that I don't enjoy. I don't want to do social media management. I don't want to do all of these other things.
Yeah.
I can hone in on the things that make me really excited and just become the best at that instead of being everything for everyone.
That's great. I love it. Promote the podcast and promote your book, Sara, as we close off. Come on.
Oh, if I must.
Come on, you have to. I love it.
Our podcast is branded. It's a comprehensive guide to creative branding. It is everywhere, but you can go to listentobranded.com. If you are trying to start a podcast and don't know where to start, go to podcastworkbook.com, and we have a full workbook that goes through the entire launch process, and it's super fun, super cute, and it's designed to be really nostalgic, all kind of like 90s high school.
Nice.
So go get that, and openthisbook.com. My book is available. If you would like a free peek, I did take all of the journal prompts, all of the writing to help you write your own story, and separated those out, and you can download them for free at openthisjournal.com. See, that was like 5 of my own URLs right there. I love
that. I was going to ask you.
I just broke my own rule, though, because I always say give 1 CTA, but you asked me to promote like 3 things at once, so I had to.
I set you up. That's my fault.
That was your fault.
Yeah, that's my fault.
You can find all of that also just favoritedaughtermedia.com.
Of course.
So you can, it is all in one place too. But if you want each of them separately.
So that was 6.
The most important
one.
Are we
at 6 now?
I know.
Yeah, we're 6.
I have so many URLs.
I love it.
The most important one is Open This Journal, because you can get all the journal, all the writing exercises to start telling your own story.
So if you haven't caught on to buying your own domain matters after this conversation, I don't know where you've been for the last 40 minutes.
Or else I'd be sitting here saying, okay, so go to favoritedaughtermedia.com/podcast and then go to favoritedaughtermedia.com/openthisbook. Like,
No. Come on, people.
No.
Right. Do it. Do the thing.
Do the thing. They're like $11.99.
Come on.
For the year. If you don't use it after that year, just get rid of it. It's fine.
It's good.
Go buy it.
Sara, I love this. This is awesome. Again, I'm going to go right now, after we're done here, I'm going to go check to see if my book's here. And if it is, I'm going to do a happy dance, which no one needs to see.
Oh, no, send a video.
And
video will be in the show notes. I already said you can't take it back.
See, there we go. See, this is why I wanted Sara on the podcast. Sara, thank you so much for doing this. You're coming back for writing the next chapter. We're going to get deeper into the book, which I love. Share more about that and introduce you to that audience as well. So thank you so much for doing this. This is awesome.
Thank you. No, I can't wait to be back next week.
Okay, I'm going to go hit play on one of your episodes right now, again, while I go check for my book. Thank you so much for doing this. Hey, thanks for being here on the How to Podcast series. Glad to have you on the show with us, listening in. And I hope they're finding value in the podcast. I hope they're finding something that helps you with your show, helps you with the tools and the information from these amazing guest co-hosts through our daily Daves and these solo episodes. The variety of what we're doing here on the podcast is all designed for you, so that you can get the tools you need to create your podcast, to keep going with your show. That's why we're here. That's why I'm doing this. And I'm glad you're here finding value in this. If you would like to do a little bit more than just be a listener, if you want to do community with podcasters, we have a thing called our Meetup on meetup.com. You can come find us, and there'll be a link on our website at howtopodcast.ca, and you can come and join in on our Meetup. Instead of just being a listener, you could actually participate and come in and join other podcasters, just like you, at your stage, at your level, where you're at right now. And then other podcasters who are maybe a little further down the road, who can learn from you and you can learn from them. And we host these meetups on a regular basis. Again, go to howtopodcast.ca and you'll find all the information there. We'd love for you to come join us at our next meetup. The only thing we need at our next meetup is you. You're the only thing missing from all of this. So consider joining our meetups. Again, they're totally free on a regular basis, all through howtopodcast.ca. And I'd love to hear more from you about your podcast as well. There's a SpeakPipe link on howtopodcast.ca. Leave a message. I'd love to hear about you and your show and how we can work together to get your message into the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for sharing the show with another podcaster that you're like, hey, I think you'd really like this episode. Go ahead, share the episode, and let's get more podcasters on the mic. Thanks for listening.